Science of history. The misplaced focus of history, dates and individuals. It would just suffice to quote John Bagot Glubb's The Fate of Empires and Search for Survival. Physical science has expanded its knowledge by building on the work of its predecessors and by making of careful experiments, the results of which are meticulously recorded. Such methods have not yet been employed in the study of world history. Our piecemeal historical work is still mainly dominated by emotion and prejudice. Any useful lessons to be derived must be learned by the study of the whole flow of human development, not by the selection of short periods here and there in one country or another. Every age and culture is derived from its predecessors, adds some contribution of its own, and passes successors. If we boycott various periods of history, the origins of the new cultures which succeeded them cannot be explained. History should be taught as the history of the human race, though of course with emphasis on the history of the student's own country. 4 imports from the quote are loud and sharp. First, Glubb is telling us to use scientific methods and means in investigating and writing history. Second, he implies period or people-centered historical accounts tend to be limited in meaning. Third, everything about and around us at all times, past, present, and future, is historical, accumulative. Fourth, history should be humanity-wide, in other words, about societies as a whole. It should be history of communities, not a few in a community, about the lives of people and how, what, and why it evolved. Why science of history at the start of learning history? Social science education in schools in general, and history in particular, is unduly controversial, crafted, and non-educational. Curricular history books are the battlefields of political parties, elections, governments, and this tends to render the books irrelevant to people and often wrong and offensive to democratic sensibilities. And this has been the reality ever since the creation of the current form of the school system, K-12, in the 1850s in the US, by way of government-prescribed syllabi and textbook to be used by teachers to transact content in classrooms. However, the information revolution, as well as the fast-crystallizing reality of globe as a village, have brought people too close for comfort, in case our historical identities are in conflict. We need to be able to see our personal and community identities in essential harmony with the rest of the world. This also implies that we rework our historical accounts to focus on the life of ordinary people and the everyday dynamics of communities and national societies rather than just a few people and the big events. History better be the narrative of the essential unity of the humankind, the lives of the mass of common faceless people. In all this, the only viable option is that every one of us grow to be so discernible about the essence of history and the historical accounts, to be not swayed by the narratives. Above all, we all should be students of historiography, the knowledge of how history is written, and also of evaluating historical accounts. Making curricular history meaningful to help think historically. The science of history uniquely and substantively addresses the gaps in curricular history resources. It explores history as a domain of knowledge creation and extensively prepares us to read historical accounts with far more objectivity and realistic appreciation. It aims to hone our thinking, events, and conditions. to make historical knowledge live a better present and future. It is a must for reading history books because knowing how historical accounts must be created is essential to appreciating such accounts. The science of history will reface history education, the first part. This science is going to transform history education in quite a few ways. In a way, it is layer of theory of knowledge of history. Essentially, it is the essential knowledge to appreciate the knowledge that history creates. First and foremost, the science of history is a reflection of how educators, not historians, shall write history books. We, my wife and I, are educators. It is how educationally sounder historical accounts may be created. Being educationally sound implies that the process best enriches the thinking and affective domains of the learners. It may also be added that the educational soundness is fairly contextual. What do we mean by contextual sense of educational soundness? This is one key anchor of what we call the science of history. To the point, it is rooted in our clarity of what is quality of education. It is how well have we prepared our children for the society and the times when they would be adult and independent. Thus, every historical account, the smallest details, must be most rigorously vetted for the kind of young adult being encultured out of the young children in their tweens and early teens. Obviously, the educational soundness of history must be most responsibly and decisively evolve out of the best consensus possible at the national society level. For history, person most mark on every one of us. And as all true educators would do, it is centered around the readers. It is conceived and organized to scaffold concepts and practices in writing history in a subtle, substantiated way that stays. Second, it introduces a comprehensively new architecture for historical accounts, for instance, the classicalization of history of society and ordinary people. Classicalization is meant to refer to the most characteristic feature of the literary classics, being a vivid account of the eternal truths about people and societies, and how history should be no less, be the history of society and ordinary people. The science of history is also, first of its kind historical exploration, reflecting in a collection of narratives using celebrated published historical accounts. It is to help self-analysis of the whole gamut of historical objects such as events, personalities, monuments, artifacts, oral history, etc. in reading our past from a given present or a specific quest and context. The idea is to offer generic capabilities to see history through the lens of around 20 historical objects, such as wars, artifacts, literature, politics, technology, geography, religion, revolutions, and more. The science of history will reface history education. The science of history will reface history education. The second part. Recall in the first part of this reel, we explored the background and the first two ways history education must change. Third, and ironically, science of history draws way beyond the traditional K-12 curricula and the Indian K-12 curricula, to be precise. It is significantly drawn from graduate history curricula. If history has to make sense, history education in schools must offer an inventive adventure into graduate curricula, and that is what we have attempted. Basic philosophical context of history, all kinds of knowledge are better understood with their philosophical underpinnings. It offers the broad framework of past-present, the interaction of the two, and the role of the historian, as well as an explicit appreciation of objectivity in writing history. Fourth, the family will be the new seat of history education. Schools have been the most prominent and influential source of history, but the result has been mass disassociation with history by the end of grade 6 itself, dates, people, buildings, paintings, etc., are too meaningless and overwhelming. History has been robbed of its high ground: data, analysis, interpretation within a philosophical context. There is a science to history. History collects evidence of the lives and things of the past and creates best-case creations of the past. Of course, through the lens of the present, which keeps changing with time. Fifth, social sciences are no more the poor cousins of sciences. In a global village, already a reality, we know well thy neighbor. History was never more important. We need to objectively know the relevant past of all the national societies. Thus, but maybe the most importantly, we want the world to get interested in history, our own and of other people, and create a far more compassionate us globally. A blind spot of humankind. Everyone experiences and lives, strictly speaking, technology. Many of us also know the enriching role played by the mainstream social sciences, such as psychology, geography, political science, etc. Yet, and indeed inexplicably, history has acquired the same legendary status and association the overwhelming majority has with mathematics. Being considered weak in history is also a badge of honor and creativity. No cringe factor is associated with disinterest in academic history. However, like math, history is in our DNA. From another perspective, knowledge of the historical context of things enriches our everyday life. We live in the present and also plan for the future, but how do we understand where we are going? It is valued and to be welcomed. To be in the know of where and why we are moving towards a desired future, we need to understand where we have come from. What would be a better future for all? And for that, we need an appreciation of history.